Jai Meher Baba. Today is Saturday, January 11th, 2025. This is a meeting of remembrance of Don Stevens with Meher Baba. And it will be Don's birthday this week on January 14th. He was born January 14th, 1919. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share a few things and then open it up for everybody to share. Does that sound good? And before I share, let's just go around and acknowledge everybody who's on the call. I love to do that because I like to remember that everybody's Baba. We're all Baba. So I'm going to gallery view. I'm Laurent Weichberger. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. Would everybody like to introduce themselves?
Sure.
Hey, Mary Ellen.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Lynch, and I am in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on a very cold morning in Myrtle Beach.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with everyone.
Yeah, good to be with you too.
Hey, Baba. I'm Hassan from Istanbul, Turkey.
Glad you can join
Time to time,
Turkey. That's awesome.
time to time, I try to join Baba group in Myrtle Beach, but not every time because sometimes the hours of difference is so big. So sometimes it's middle of the night here, but I'm very sad for that. What can I do? So thank you, Lauren. We're going to talk about our dear, very dear Don. I met him first when I was a student in Marseille in 77, 78. He used to come to visit us. So I have a long time contact with him, and he was very, very dear to me and to my family. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, awesome. After we do the introductions, we want to hear some of your stories, Hassan. So don't be bashful. Daniel, we're just doing introductions right now.
Hi, Hassan, you know me. I'm Daniel Sanders. I was part of the Don Stevens Young People's Group, the American Young People's Group, starting in 2004. That lasted till Don's passing in 2011.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good morning.
Rosa, we're doing introductions.
My turn?
Yeah.
Rosa is my nom de zoom. Some people know me as Katie Rose. And I heard you speak, Lauren, a couple of times about Don, and I was so impressed by Don's relationship with Baba, the intimacy and the new things I would learn when I listened to your talk, that here I am for more.
Awesome. Glad you could join.
Yeah, thank you, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. We have Diane and Terry. Do you want to introduce? And Prakash and Karen.
Hi, it's Diane and Terry from Venice. We can't come on camera right now.
Just because we're in the bed because we haven't slept well, that's all. But we're here and present.
And really happy to be here.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Nice to see you all here. Jai Baba. I'm from New Jersey at this time. And yeah, we'll continue with the program. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Prakash.
Jai Baba.
Karen, you want to introduce? Maybe she stepped away. Okay. I was going to share a couple things and then turn it over to each person to share a Don story or two. Does that sound good? So I was asked to speak at the Northeast Gathering. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
What do you see? What does it show?
Loading. There it is, your slide presentation.
Yeah, I was asked to speak at the Northeast Gathering about three things: my life with Don Stevens, love, and forgiveness. So I gave three talks. So I thought this might be an interesting place to start, was just kind of an overview of Don, and then turn it over to people to share some stories. This is the photo Don attached to his application to Black Mountain College. And the application was dated April 11th, 1935. And Don was born 1919 in Nevada. And if you've ever seen a picture of where he was born, it's basically nothing there. There's just sand dunes and a railroad station. It's like the smallest place in the universe. So he really came from nothing, is a good way to say it. His family moved to California. He became a Sufi in the order of Hazrat Inayat Khan, which is a Chishti order. He learned of Meher Baba from Rabia Martin, who was the Murshida of that order in the West in 1945. He became an executive at Chevron Oil, which was originally Standard Oil of California. And then he met Baba for the first time in New York City in 1952. And I pointed out to him that that's 7 years difference from when he learned about Baba until he met him in New York. And he said, "Little Bear, I needed those 7 years." Then, of course, he worked for Baba, with Baba, from 52 until 69 when Baba passed away, under Baba's direct guidance, first at Sufism and then independently. Baba referred to Don as my son and my spiritual son. I could show you those letters. If you don't have it, I put all of this information in excruciating detail in my biography of Don called An Almost Perfect Balance. So you can get that. Don was evicted from Sufism after Baba passed away. That's a painful, long story. And then he retired to England and France. When I met him, he was living in a flat in London and an apartment in Paris. And I went to both places. And of course, he led the Baba groups in Europe and the USA, different Baba groups in the Europe and the USA from 69 until Don passed in 2011. So he wasn't the only leader, but one of the primary leaders. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share in the way of like an overview of Don. I've got tons of slides. I don't know if that's really appropriate for this. So I'll just stop that and ask who would like to share remembrance, because I really want to hear more from you than from me. Who would like to share remembrance of Don? Hassan, this might be a good time for you to chime in. I think you knew him before all of us here.
I don't know. But I'm sorry for my English. It's the first time.
You speak very well. You speak very well, Hassan.
You are so gentle. If there is any misunderstanding, please interrupt me. So, as I said, I was a student in France, in Marseille, those years in early 70s. But my story is completely another long and another story. But I met a lady, a French lady, that Kitty Davy sent me a letter giving her address. So this lady's name was Yvonne Antoni. Her husband, his name is on written on the marble of
Vision
memorial.
changes or blurred vision, joint aches and pain, or parasitic infection. Don't change.
So their connection with Baba is very, very deep and spiritual, no doubt about it. Although Robert, her husband, name, met Baba only once in London in 52, I suppose, and the connection became immediately extraordinary. So this is why his name is in prayer. How it's good. inscribed on the marble of the memorial tower at Mehrabad. So even I met her where she was living in Marseille also. She used to live in Paris at that time. But with Don Stevens' desire and kind of demand to Yvonne that he should move to Marseille. Although from her very young age, she was a Marseillaise. She was from Marseille. But at 18, when she was at 18 years old, she was obliged to leave Marseille definitively. And she said, never again I will return to this city again. A year passed by, and they came. Yvonne came with other ladies to Baba's orbit. This is also another extraordinary Baba story, but it's another story. So Don started coming to Paris, giving talks, etc. And Yvonne and Don had a very, very special contact to each other. From her eyes, each time we met Don in Marseille for our meetings, he was looking him as her son, as her master, as her beloved. She always adored Don, and Don was extremely gentle with her. That was our observation. So Don asked her to move to Marseille without knowing her story past in Marseille. So he moved there. For some months later, when I met her, she talked about Don Stevens, and she said, if we made a big group, a group of few people, so he would come to see us regularly and give talk about Meher Baba. I was completely ignorant about Baba. But at the first time when for some months I worked with Yvonne Antoni, she became my spiritual mother, and she was very tough with me. I was very young. I was questioning a lot. And when I felt myself sufficient to talk to my friends at the school about Meher Baba. So they start interested in him, and they start coming to see Yvonne. And we formed a little group there. And then Yvonne called Don if he can come to visit us. So he started coming once every month as he was doing a tour in France. Once every weekend, either he was going to Paris or Pomeroy or Marseille, London. So it was his touring. In the very beginning, he was living in Madrid, but then he moved to Monaco. So he was much more near to us.
So what year was this now? What year?
77.
Okay.
It was 1977. And, or 77, 78, something like that. 77, I met Yvonne, and 78 with Don Stevens. Until
Unlived
19,
France alone.
Yeah. For some reason, I really liked him, but I can't.
Yeah, he's a
So, my first meeting with Dan was at her house. It was a small studio apartment. So we have been around 7, 8 international community, all my from my school, some architects, some fine arts students from Iran, from Turkey, France, of course, and from Lebanon. We were really a very interesting group, all young, same age almost. So Don came and started giving talks, and then have light dinner with champagne, because she was very, very arrogant French woman. So she always offered champagne for celebrate Baba's presence among us. Well, Don was a very special person, very special. Of course, we were very young. We had promoted minds, different cultures, different family educations, etc. These guys asking questions and questions, and Don's patience was incredible, incredible. And I remember once, he once said, "Don, after all these years I'm with you, I've never talked about this kind of questions." And Don turned to her and said, "Yvonne, you have faith." Well, between us and her, so it was a big difference, of course. So after I start looking, meeting him at the train station and taking him to Yvonne's apartment every meeting time. So on the road, we used to talk leisurely. It's I always, I'm not American. I am not European. I'm Middle Eastern person. So our education is is like extreme politeness for the elderly people. We shouldn't ask many questions. We shouldn't talk. We only respect what they say, etc. So today, I'm really sad with that education, because I'd like to ask many other questions to him. It intrigued my mind after many years, especially how he managed spiritual life with oil world. Even those years, I believe that oil world is a criminal world. And how this awful, I mean, how can I explain that? But only money made, the many problems comes from these oil companies for the world suffering, like arms selling, oil producing. For me, it's equal. And how Don managed that? This is two worlds completely apart.
That's why, Hassan, that's why I put it in the biography that if he was just
Exactly.
if he was just
Exactly.
if he was just an oil executive, that's not really worthy of a biography. If he's just a Bible lover, but doing both, oil executive and disciple of
Exactly.
Baba together, integrated, that's incredible.
Exactly. Exactly. When I read the book, I got the answer. It's This is in the book. This is a kind of Unitarian unity of 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 uh, of fruition, uh, if I can say. And Baba said because he wanted to retire from that job, and Baba said, "Who do you think? I put you in this business, so this is my duty to retire you from there if necessary." So it became clear. Thank you for the book. Thank you for the book.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This ambiguity in my mind, many years I suffered for it. And I said, how Don manage this? How much he must suffer between these two worlds. But yeah, and in one of our meetings with him, and he used to say, how to talk with Baba. How to talk with Baba. And before he was going to the meeting, the oil company meeting, he used to go into his room, close the door, and expose to Baba out loudly problem and how he can help him to solve these problems outwardly. And then he made the gesture. I turn off, it's like a turn off the light or turn on the light, turn off the light. It's something like that. You turn off the light, you expose, and you turn on the light. So you have your connection, deep connection with Baba for that problem, and you go and he will help. So this advice was really, really so important for us all. How to communicate with Baba.
I love it.
We can make prayers. We can make many things for Baba, asking, demanding, but talking is different.
I love it.
Without expecting anything, just to make him awaken to the problem. He's always awake, of course, no doubt. But at the moment, that instant.
So Hassan, I've got a talk from Don called Baba in Our Personal Lives, and I'm transcribing that talk for a chapter in a new book that I'm putting together about Baba and love. So you can see exactly what you're talking about, where he talks about Baba's involved in our personal life and all that. So it's exactly what you're talking about. I also want to give other people a chance to talk since we heard good stories from you. Can we give somebody else a chance? Who wants to share a story about Don? Daniel?
Yeah, I myself was here more to listen than to share, but I could I guess one of the more dramatic stories that comes to mind, I've probably shared it before, would be that I was with Don when he had congestive heart failure in 2006 in Salem, Massachusetts. And on that occasion, we had just had a weekend long YPG Young People's Group meeting at the home of Richard and Cynthia Griffin. And so we'd had a great weekend together as usual with the YPG meetings. And then most of the people had left. And it was just Richard and Cynthia, and I was still there, and Seven, and we were all sleeping. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard this raspiness. Don had gotten up, he couldn't breathe, but he was able to get up and to knock on Seven's door. And I got up and saw what was happening, and then woke up Richard and Cynthia and got them to call 911. And so Don wasn't able to speak because because of the breathing, and I didn't know what was going through his mind. And I remember like wanting or trying to say something comforting to him, that help was on the way, and just thinking, my God, like, how scary this must be. You can't breathe. It didn't look good. And I'd of course known that Don had said that his worry, something that had always really fascinated me about Don, was that he was like the man without worry. When he met Bob in 1952, like he said that Bob had removed like psychic surgery or something, had removed his ability to worry. And so that had always fascinated me. But so the paramedics showed up, and they got Don in the ambulance, and I found out later that Don had actually died and been revived in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. And so I didn't see him again until 4 hours later in the emergency room. And then and I got to go see how he was doing. And there was a nurse there who was, trying to be comforting, but kind of talking to Don in a condescending way. She said, "Oh, I bet that was scary, huh?" As if he was more hard of hearing or something than, or more mentally incoherent than he actually was. And he just he took off his oxygen mask, and he just said, "No, it was the air couldn't get into the lungs, and I need to find a way to get the air into the lungs." He said that in more of a Don way, like it was this technical problem that he had to solve. And that was the moment when it really hit me, like, oh wow, I think he really is the man without worry. And then he was concerned about me getting to the train station on time so I could catch my plane back to Arizona. And I thought, my God, what a time, he's just died and come back to life. And one of his first priorities is making sure that I can catch my train and get back to my job on time. And so that kind of was a very remarkable thing. And then Laurent, I know, saw Don after his heart surgery a few weeks later, and was a witness to Don's very remarkable and quick recovery, breaking some records at the hospital there, and just coming home and playing the piano for Cynthia on her birthday, and just sat right down, instead of being an invalid in bed 3 days after open heart surgery. He was just sitting down to play the piano. And so it was something remarkable that his trust and faith in life and Baba were able to, the things that he was able to do. And then it was, 2.5 years later, on his 90th birthday, I was with him in India for the 3rd Beads on One String pilgrimage. So just like the odds, when he was having congestive heart failure in Massachusetts in 2006, like the odds of him being there and traveling around India for almost a month, it just is astounding to me still.
Those are great stories, Dan. Great.
Yeah.
Prakash says, J. Baba Laurent, I am on the road. I will be listening to all these wonderful shares, recalling time spent with dear Don and stories about him. Thank you all, and thank you for hosting this, Jay Meher Baba. That was from Prakash. Does anybody else have a story about Don or a question about Don? I
never
see
met
Ralph
Don.
is raising his hand. Go ahead, Ralph.
I did. I never met or nor was I introduced to Don. I laid eyes. I saw him once, probably about 1975, perhaps. And I was living in Myrtle Beach, staying at Laura Delevingne's house, roommate with Walter Witkowski. And one day, we had an apartment room that Mrs. Delavigne had converted her carport into an apartment. And but we had meals with her and paid rent and room and board, and pretty much just freely you know pass through the house if necessary. And one day I walked in from work or from wherever I'd been, to perhaps to the center, and walked through the front door, and I recognized Don from films, but plenty of films and pictures. And he and Laura were standing in the middle of the living room, toe to toe, and he was taller than she, and they were just nose to nose, talking and having a very intimate conversation. And they didn't even notice me. And I said, oh, and I just slipped on through. And that was the only time I ever met him. But I always wondered, what a magnificent person. All I knew all, and had heard rumors about awkward difficulty with this relationship with Mrs. Deuce and Charmy, and then being a key rock in the part of the Sufi group. So he really had three things. He had Baba and the work Baba was giving to he and Ivy Merced Deuce, and the marriage not working out. There must have been.
Yeah.
I mean, Baba would have, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't hear a question there, Ralph, so I'm going to turn it over to Tina. Tina, do you have a question?
Yes, I wondered if he ever talked about being gay.
He did. Do you want me to respond to that?
Yes.
Sure. So what happened was Charles Haynes and his husband Christopher had moved into Dilruba when Jane Haynes retired from her position, and Charles was the heir apparent to lead the Mayher Spiritual Center. And as many of us remember, that was a very painful, awful time where the community in Myrtle Beach and around the world actually became split about a homosexual leader of the Mayher Spiritual Center. And Charles was persecuted and eventually resigned, and Charles and Christopher moved to Virginia and left that all behind. And I confronted Don about it when I was with Don in London, because I wanted to get Don's response to how Charles was treated by the Mayor Baba community, at least half of the Baba community, because it was like right down the middle. The whole community got divided. And so I made up a whole set of questions to interview Don about and made a video. And that was just one of the questions, was about Charles and Christopher and homosexuality with Mayor Baba. And Don's answer was extremely short, like a half of a sentence, and he wanted to move on. So that night over dinner, I said, Don, because we were very casual in our communication, I said, Don, I was kind of disappointed that you gave such a short answer about what happened with Charles at the Baba Center around homosexuality. You know so much more about that subject. And he said, I know. And I said, well, we should really address that. And he said, but how? How can we address it? What should we do? That's how Don and I would talk. He wouldn't talk as if he was directing. He would talk more as if we were collaborating on solving a problem. And I said, well, we could put together a seminar about homosexuality with Mayor Baba and present that in America and invite all the people who are against homosexuality and against Charles and Christopher, and invite people who are for, LGBTQ plus, all the different sexual preferences and ways of living, and have everybody come together and we could hash it out the way Baba would want. Baba would want us to discuss it and get along like one family of Baba. And Don said, wow, you think we could do that? And I said, I think so. So we reached out to the Mayor Spiritual Center and they said, absolutely not. You can't have a program like that at the Mayor Spiritual Center. And then we reached out to people who we knew were against homosexuality, who had been vocal, and they said they wouldn't participate in such a seminar. And we reached out to people who were for Charles and Christopher to co-present with us, and they all said no. And so Don and I did it in Myrtle Beach. We were the only two presenters, and we did it at a house in Myrtle Beach because the Baba Center wouldn't allow us to do it at the Baba Center. So we did it at Joan Agan's house across the street from the Baba Center in Briarwood. And there was not an empty seat. People sat on tables. They sat on the floor. There was not an empty inch in that house. And we recorded it. The book is called Sexuality on the Spiritual Path. It's a transcript of the entire session. And the way Don self-identified in that session is he said, I remember very clearly because I was sitting next to him, he said, I love people. Does that make me bisexual? That's how he self-identified when it came up. Now, he didn't say out loud, I am bisexual, I am homosexual. And in fact, he brought up two women to Baba 2 different times to get married to them, 2 different occasions. And one of the occasions, Baba said, she's not the one for you. So what ended up happening was Don did have both homosexual and heterosexual relationships throughout his life. So he behaved like a bisexual human. And after Baba passed away in 1969, he had a boyfriend named Claude Longuet, who's a friend of mine. I became friends with him through Don, and he was with Claude from 1969 until his passing in 2011. So the rest of his life, roughly 40 years, I think is the number if you do 69 to 2011. Maybe longer, 50 years? 50 years. Anyway, it's a long time. And so the overarching experience that Don had was that Baba never told him to not be homosexual. There was one story that Baba said to Don about a specific relationship. Don, I know that you will do everything in your power to make a relationship work. You will not abandon the relationship. You will work tirelessly to make a relationship work. He said, but I also know the other individual in this relationship. And I know his nature. So Baba said to Don, I want you to promise me, Don, that if your relationship with him starts to undermine your physical health, that you will turn your back on the relationship and not look back. And when Don explained this to me, and he explained it to the whole room at the seminar also, but when he explained it to me, he said, I didn't know why Baba was saying this. But he said, do you know, Little Bear, it turned out exactly like that. The relationship got worse and worse and worse. And then I had to ask myself, because I remembered my promise to Baba, is this relationship undermining my physical health? And he said, when I did an interior check, I said, by gosh, it is undermining my health. And I had to cut off the relationship and turn my back on it and move on. And he said, but don't tell anybody who the person was because they're still alive and they'd be crushed if they heard this, because Don didn't explain why he was breaking up and that it was Baba's order. He never explained that to the partner. He just cut off the relationship and moved on. So that was a very interesting story in terms of Baba made it about Don's health. Baba didn't use the word homosexual or homosexuality in his, from what I understand, in his communication with Don about the relationship. It was just a relationship. Does that help in any way, Tina? You have to unmute.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question or a story about Don?
I remember Don Stevens coming to Minneapolis in the very early 80s at the invitation of Barbara and Wendell Bressman. And it's not a dramatic story. It's just a memory that I have because Don was with us there in the group for probably 3 or 4 days, which now seems an incredibly long period of time to have had an extremely sweet and intimate time with him. We had some public presentations and talks, but for the most part, we just kind of were together. And we would have teas and we would have lunches and we had breakfasts and we just talked. And it was just I was aware of Don and had read several of his writings at that point or listened to his talks. But there was nothing specific or remarkable that I remember, except it was an extremely lovely, soft time together. And
Wonderful.
yeah, after that, I read several writings of his or heard him or saw him, but it was that time in the early 80s was just an exceptional opportunity for us because the group in Minneapolis was surprisingly large, living up in the backwoods of Minnesota. People would come down to the Twin Cities, and yet it was just a very intimate time.
That's awesome.
With him.
Sounds beautiful. It reminds me of one quote that when I was collecting material for Don's biography that I wrote, one of the people who was close to Don said that Baba said, Don will give love the way a philanthropist gives money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. Yes. And that's very much what I remember. As I said, there was nothing that I can recall that was dramatic or that he said that left a lasting imprint, but it was an environment. It was an atmosphere of such softness and gentleness. And we were together truly a number of hours every day. We had that kind of opportunity for being with each other. And it's left that sense with me since then. Very strong memory of that time.
It's awesome. I love it.
I did too.
Thank you for sharing, Mary Ellen. Anybody else have a question about Don or a story to tell? I know Dan and I are both able to answer questions, and of course, so is Hassan. Hassan is the elder on this one. No more questions?
I guess I was reminded of one more anecdote about Don by some of what was just shared.
Sure. And then Rosa, just so you know.
Okay, sorry. So shortly after the first YPG meeting in Los Angeles, I remember sticking around for an extra day, and a bunch of us were out at a restaurant with Don, and I just remember him saying something about every human interaction being an opportunity for love. And that was just something that stuck in my mind. Of course, I haven't lived up to it, but that was something that stuck with me all these years.
That's funny that you would say that, Dan, because I was about to tell that anecdote, but I decided not to, and then you did. So, but I'll just confirm it for people. My version of that was when I first had dinner with Don in 2003 in London. He made dinner. It's a long story, but the anecdote is he asked me, how do I approach my relationship with Mayor Baba? And because we didn't really know each other. And I said, well, I want to hear how you approach your relationship with Mayor Baba. So I said, well, for me, I try to focus on when I'm meeting with somebody or having an interaction with somebody, I try to focus on finding Baba within them and not getting hung up or caught up on their personality and their ego, but looking deeper into finding Baba within them. And Don said, oh, I could never do that. I said, well, how do you approach it? And he said, I try to bring as much love as I can to every encounter with every human that I ever, or every being really, not just humans, but everybody and everything that I encounter. And I thought, well, it's very similar, Don. And he said, it is similar. Okay, Rosa. Unfortunately, you're on mute, Rosa. Can you unmute?
I never had any personal experience with Don, but and it makes this experience I have of him even more interesting. Because I can't use this word with anyone else in quite the same way. I have this respect for Don as an evolved human being that is like solid in my heart, and it's very unique to him. And I have not been able until about 2 minutes ago to come up with the basis for this. I mean, there are little things like, reading Listen Humanity and hearing Laurent speak, but somehow it added up to this very special, unique response to him. And what I got just now was that it seems to me that Don was a master of life in many facets. And I remember reading, I think these were Baba words, that only the great can be truly humble. And I think Don epitomized that because the individual interactions and this and that were not like a light show and, a big drama.
Yeah.
But he was truly a great evolved being. And I get that he was extremely balanced, which is one of the remarkable things.
Yeah. Baba said Don
and a
has
master and all that. Yeah.
Baba said Don has an almost perfect balance of mind and heart.
Yeah. But even that was very subdued, not in your face. It was that great humility of his true greatness, of his mastery. Anyway, that's what I felt. I do feel.
So that reminds me of a story. Can I tell a story?
Absolutely.
When Baba met Don for the first time, and Don met Baba for the first time, I was in New York City on Baba's return to India after the car accident in Prague, Oklahoma. So the whole story's there about that. And a group of people went back with Baba to India, and they stopped first in Switzerland. I believe it was Switzerland, and recuperated a little bit there. There was recuperation all along the way. There was recuperation in Myrtle Beach, recuperation in New York, recuperation in Switzerland. So Baba took his time going back to India after the accident, and he got a letter, I believe I'm remembering correctly, from Charmian Deuce, where Baba was talking to the group in Switzerland about the trip in America. And Charmian wrote this up for Don. And she said at one point, Baba stopped and said, you know, now that I think about it, of all the people I met in America on this trip, Don Stevens pleased me the most. And he said that even the suffering that he endured in the accident was worth it for the opportunity to meet somebody of the caliber of Don Stevens. And he said more, and there was all this other stuff. And Don said when he got the letter, he was crying and he burned the letter because it was just so intense to receive these words about how much Baba loved Don. And, you know, Baba obviously had a special place in his heart for Don. He told him, whenever you're anywhere near India, I want you to come and visit me. You don't have to write to me and ask permission. You don't have to cable me. You don't have to call me. Just come. So he was one of the only people in the world at the time who had an open door policy to just walk in on Baba. And he would do it. He would walk into Mandalay Hall and Baba would be talking to the Mandalay and Baba would just say, oh, Don, good. We're playing cards. Come, you know, or sit. I'm telling them about such and such. You know, it was very casual. And another story I remember is, sorry for telling stories, but now I'm a little wound up. Another story I remember is Don said Baba told him, okay, come on, we're getting in the car. You know, it was like being so casual with Baba that Baba was like, come on, we're going out, you know. And Don just did whatever Baba wanted. So he went in the back seat and Baba was always in the front seat next to the driver. And the driver starts off and they're driving down the road. And Don said, Baba reached his hand back and just held Don's hand while they were driving. And Don said, I had never had any experience like this in my life because his own father was not loving and tender. That's a whole nother thing. He said, and here was Baba just tenderly holding my hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't look back at me, nothing. He just held my hand. And then just as he had held my hand, he pulled his hand back up again and off we went. And he said, you know, it was a moment basically, but it made such a huge impression on Don, the silent tenderness of that love flow between them. And it made me think of my daughter, Aspen, who's now 29. But when she was about 4 or 5 and she'd be in her car seat behind me while I'm driving and I'd pull up to a red light or something, you know, and I'd just reach back and, you know, say, you okay back there? And hold her hand for a minute and then keep driving. But there's that kind of, it's so much more than family. It's like the love flow between your favorite person, you know, it's like that. It's like incredibly tender, loving moments. Right. And Don was very clear, like he did not expect it. And it was a brand new experience. And that was just part of his journey with Baba. There was many other moments and other stories, but that was just one of them. I'll let somebody else talk now. Is this a good experience? This conversation? Everybody enjoying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
Other questions? Other stories?
Go ahead, Tina.
Tina,
To
if
share
you're trying to talk,
anything. I don't want to share anything.
you don't?
No.
Okay. Somebody else?
I just thought I'd note that Don's birthday is coming up in a few days. Sorry, got a noisy dog here.
Yeah, Dan, I started the meeting with that. that his birthday is on January 14th. That's okay.
Sorry,
That's okay. Um, would you like me to share a few more of the slides? Would that be helpful?
Yes, of course. Please.
Can you see it? Can you see when I move the mouse?
Yeah.
Here's Baba with Don at a hotel in New York City in 1956 with Erich looking on. I love this photo because just right here, I can feel this. Baba's hand on Don's shoulder and the love. It's incredible to me. I can feel it. Here in Myrtle Beach, also 1956, they came down from New York. Baba's up against the tree in a chair. I don't know how you could get much closer to Baba than where Don is. He's right there next to Baba. Erich is here. I believe this is Fred Winterfeld. Somebody else might know better than me. I believe this is Gene Shaw. I believe this is Darwin Shaw. I believe this is Adele Wolkin. But this is early days, right? And Don's right there.
They
This is
misspelled Erich's name.
Yep. Thank you.
Erich's
You are correct.
EU.
Sorry. Please forgive me.
What was that first slide, Laurent, listing? I came in late. It was kind of a bio, I guess. Here, yeah. Okay.
I can send you these slides. Anybody who wants these, just send me an email. I'm at ompoint, OMPOINT, ompoint@gmail.com. If you want the slides, send me an email. I'll send you the slides. We also have Baba at Myrtle Beach, 1956. And somebody asked him, Baba, what are you making there? And Baba said, it's the first man. Baba's making a little sandcastle of the first man. And here's Don right there with his camera. Here's one of Baba's Mandali having a very good laugh at all this. This is one of my favorite pictures in the whole situation here. So it's a whole chapter in Don's biography about Baba in the barn in Myrtle Beach. Throughout the entire experience of the presentation in the barn in the chapter, Baba has Don next to him, and he's basically having Don represent him, reading his messages, explaining things. It's really an incredible chapter. And Vanessa said, as a father, you would put your son next to you. So I think that's an extraordinary photo of them together in the barn. Don doesn't seem to be part of the audience. He seems to be part of the presentation package here. It's an incredible photograph.
And also his position with the hand listening like that.
Yeah.
Don's gesture.
So beautiful, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of my favorite photos of Baba and Don. Here, I love this photo. This is the East-West gathering in 1962 in India. And you can see Baba's brother is here filming Baba. Erich is here behind Baba, where he normally would be helping Baba. And Don is somewhere behind the scenes next to Bahram. So everybody else is out here, right? And Don seems to be part of the production crew. He's in a special place, is what I'm getting at. Of course, beloved Baba passed away in 1969. And here's Don, February 1969. I thought initially that was Ivy Deuce, but Ivy didn't make it. That's Delia de Leon. And Don said he could go all the way down into the crypt. There's stairs that go down into the crypt. So Don was one of the first people to make it to Mehrabad after Baba passed away. Let's see what else. We can go into the young people's group for a minute. Here's Rancho Palos Verdes, the first young people's group meeting. Don told me over dinner in London that he felt he had neglected the younger generation. That's what he told me. And I said, well, we should do something about that, Don. And he said, well, what could we do? I said, well, how about like a seminar? We could talk to the young people and you could talk to them about what you want to share. He says, oh, I like that. Let's call it the Carry the Torch seminar. And he said, I'll go around and travel around America and meet with the young people and share with them. And I said, well, Don, you're getting older and they're younger. Maybe you let them come to you. We pick 1 or 2 spots and let the young people travel to you. And he said, okay. So he said he wanted 4 places that we would meet. One was in Atlanta. One was in Salem, Massachusetts, because there's Richard and Cynthia. They're in Salem, Massachusetts. He wanted them to be a host. And he said one should be in Oregon. He wanted Marnie and Doug Frank to be hosts. And he said, there's Marnie and Doug Frank right there. And he said, and one should be in near Los Angeles because he wanted Nasreen and Mahmoud to be hosts. And there's Mahmoud and there's Nasreen. So he called those hosts godparents. That's what he called them. And so this is the first group of young people. The other thing was he started telling me who he wanted to have as the young people who came, and they were all in their 50s and 60s. I said, Don, that's not really young people. And he started laughing because he was in his 80s. And he said, oh, I guess you're right. So then I said, why don't we go for like the 20s and 30s age instead of the 50s and 60s? So he said, well, who would that be? And I started listing off people, Ben Walbach, Ryan Brown, of course, Daniel Sanders, who's here and he's on the call today, Allison Govey, Marlena Applebaum, and others. And he didn't know many of these people. So I just said, what about these people? And he said, okay, good. So then that's how that came to be. Is that interesting? Do you remember those days? Oh, Diane and Terry have a hand up.
Hi, we got out of bed, thanks. Did Don have an understanding why he had such an important position in Baba's life? Did he ever talk about that? Like you referred to him as Baba's son and the juxtaposition of how he sat. Did he get it?
That's a great question, Diane. Let me just acknowledge the question. I will start to answer that, and then I will let other people who knew Don maybe better than me or longer than me answer it also. I never once got the sense from Don that he felt he was in a special position in Baba's life. He didn't refer to himself as one of Baba's Mandali, although Baba indicated Don was one of Baba's Mandali. He never referred to himself as that. I said, how should I refer to you? And he said, a follower of Meher Baba. He never played any of the cards that would make him appear to be special or act special. When I was with him in groups, even though he was obviously the heavyweight and the elder, he would defer to others and say, Bruce, how do you feel about this question? And he would always encourage other people in the room and elicit their wisdom and their understanding. And he wasn't acting in a special way. Rarely ever in my life did I ever see him play a card of being the heavy or the heavyweight person in the room. That's my experience. Hassan or Daniel or anybody else want to share?
No, I'm sorry, before they do that, I understand that's what he publicly said, but did you ever get a sense that, did he like have an understanding of any past lives with Baba or just any reason why out of all the billions of people, Baba zoned in on him?
No.
No.
Hey, I should add, not only did he not have an understanding of past lives with Baba, but he was completely uninterested in the topic. And when I remember once like speculating about what role in the Mandali as compared to like the disciples of Jesus, like, what was like theorizing about like what role Don could be playing. I was thinking like oil executive and then like the tax collector, Matthew, and in Don just was like completely uninterested in being assigned like a particular status of that nature.
Following up on Dan's response, if you don't mind, Baba also said, Don is my Mercury. Now, that's an interesting statement. And I put a whole chapter in the biography about that. Mercury has many meanings. It's obviously a metal, which is a very unusual metal among metals. It's a planet in our solar system, and it's a god. It's the god that is the messenger of the gods, that takes messages between the gods. So from all of that, I certainly feel that Don played a messenger role. And I'll tell one more story that I think is really important, which is that I'll give you a longer version to give you the context. Baba had created a gathering for the Western men at Mehrabad, which later became known as the 3 Incredible Weeks. That was written up as a beautiful book. If you ever read that book, it's incredible. Malcolm Schloss and others contributed to creating that book. Anyway, Don was one of the men invited to the 3 Incredible Weeks. It wasn't titled that originally. It just became known as that. But he developed a urinary tract infection. So he wrote to Baba and said, Baba, I can't make it. My doctor has advised me not to travel to India with my condition. And so Baba wrote back saying, don't worry, Don, I'll make it up to you. And I thought, God, that's so beautiful of Baba to say that. And so the next year, Baba had a different gathering in India known as the 4 language groups Sahavas, because each language group in India got their own week with Baba to avoid the chaos of the multiple languages. So for instance, one week was the Hindi group, another week was the Gujarati group, and so on. So Don was one of only 2 Westerners invited to that 4 language group Sahavas. The other was Francis Brabazon. So Don attended it and had an incredible time, just a fantastic, extreme, beautiful experience. And at the end, Don said that he was packing up to go home in his room and all that, packing his suitcase. And one of the Mandali came and said, Don, Baba's calling you. And Don said, when you heard that, you didn't even put another sock in your suitcase. You just stopped everything you were doing and you went straight to Baba. So he turned around and went out the door following the Mandali. And he said, Baba was sitting outside the building where Don's room was in a chair under a tree. And next to Baba was a little wooden table. And on the wooden table was some papers. And on top of the papers was a rock. And he said, Baba was sitting there. And of course, Don was so happy to see Baba. And Baba said, oh, Don, I know you're getting ready to leave, but I had to talk to you before you leave. And Don said, oh, I'm so happy to talk to you too, Baba, the whole bit. And then Baba said, of course you can see I've got these papers here, but have you enjoyed your time at this 4 language groups gathering? And Don said, oh, I loved it. It was fantastic. And Baba said, oh, good. Well, now, so let's talk about these papers. And he took the rock off the papers and he handed Don this stack of papers. And Don's holding the papers and Baba said, you see, these are some messages of mine that, as I've explained to you in the past, I've given certain of my words my personal, very special attention in how they were given out and edited by me and made available to various people. But these messages here have never been published before. Would you be willing to take these and turn this into a small book? And Don looked at Baba and these messages and he said, well, Baba, I'm sure you've got, more qualified people than me to do something like that. And Baba said, no, Don, of course I would help you. And so Don said, okay, all right. okay, Baba, I'll work on that. And then Baba didn't stop there. Baba said, well, the whole time that we've had this 4 language group, Sahavas, I've had secretaries, multiple secretaries, writing down everything that I've said during this time that we've all been here together. I could make those transcripts available to you of what I've said, and you could weave that into maybe some part of the book as well. Now, Don actually told me he found that much more interesting than the stack of papers. And he said, oh, well, that would be interesting. And Baba said, you could talk about your experience here at the Sahavas and use the transcripts and kind of tell a little bit about your experience of being here. And Don said he liked it because it was more of a creative project than just taking these papers from Baba. So then Baba said, and now that I think about it, Baba values your own perspective, Don, and your own outlook and your own experience. You could have a whole nother section just, talking about Baba from your own perspective. And Don said, oh, I like that too. So he really liked the creative part around the 4 language group Sahavas with the transcripts and the part where he could just express himself freely. But he also took the papers, and he said he got home to San Francisco, and he didn't really look at the papers before that. He got home to San Francisco, and he sat on his bed, and he said he took out this envelope full of the papers from Baba, and he read each one. And he said they were actually different topics. They weren't all one topic. So he said he put after he'd read a message, he put it down on the bed in a topic area, and then he'd read the next message, and he said, oh, well, this is quite different. And he put it in a different topic area. And he ended up with like 4 or 5 different topics as a result of all these messages. And they were now in little piles, little stacks in different topics. And he said, then he would pick up one of the piles and look through it. And he said, wait a second, this is very unusual. He said, the order of the messages in the topic was such that it flowed so naturally from the end of one message to the beginning of the next that sometimes he wouldn't have to add anything at all. And if he said he had to add something, it might be a sentence or a part of a sentence to link them up. And then he picked up another pile and he said it was the same thing. From one message to the next in that topic, it flowed so naturally that he thought, what's the likelihood of this? And then he said, wait a second. Baba said, I will help you. And he said, Baba helped because by some minor miracle, the way that the papers got organized on his bed when he read through them was like this perfect ordering. It was unbelievable to him. So he said, so then those piles became part 2 of the book, Listen Humanity. And the transcripts and Don's experience of being with Baba became part 1 of the book, Listen Humanity. And then the last part is just Don, what he would call freewheeling about his experience with Baba. And that became the book, Listen Humanity. And he said he originally called it Humanity Listen because he wanted it to be the reflection of God speaks, humanity listen. But he said a friend of his talked to Don about the book that he was working on and all that, and had a dream. And he said in the dream, the title was actually flipped the other way, Listen Humanity. So Don went with the dream version of the title instead of his own version of the title. So, but most people don't know this. That entire book was Baba's idea, and Baba injected the messages with his own hand. And I'll tell you, I've been now with Baba since '86. I've heard more people say they learned about Baba or got deeper with Baba because of Listen Humanity than almost any other book available. I don't know what Baba was doing, but talk about the messenger, Mercury, Hermes. I think one is the Latin version, one is the Greek version, Hermes, Mercury, the messenger of the gods. That for me is a perfect example of Don being Baba's messenger, literally taking the messages from Baba's hand and bringing it to the world. All right, I'll let somebody else say something.
I will mention that was the first book that I read about Baba, and it was brought to me by the Bressmans since they introduced me to Baba. And that book again, nothing dramatic. It just was the stories of old friends coming together again. Beautiful book. Still one of my very special favorites.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you're another testament to the same thing. Ralph has a question.
I have a short story. I'll try to make it brief. It's actually a long story. It continues to this day somewhat. When I left Myrtle Beach to come care for my parents here in Texas, they had retired to family, old family. Actually, they had both retired to and come to care for my mother's parents who lived on this farm. And then I came to care for my parents who were ailing. My father was dying of cancer. And I started coming here about 1987, off and on. And eventually by 92, I had pretty much moved here. And this is a country place. It's very quite remote. It's from civilization or people, you know, towns. But across the road that get to this place are dirt. And across the road, there's a large ranch, some thousands of acres. And they have a place right off the road where they have corral where they work their cattle. Well, periodically, I would notice, like a few times a year, big trailers carrying horses. And they'd come in here and there would be 100 people or more. And then I would see them and they had dogs, and I'd hear the dogs, lots of dogs barking and yelping. And then I'd see them going north from the house across the road, riding their horses across the grassland, the rolling hills out there, and the dogs running in front of them. One day, I found a dog. I saw a dog in town running with the pack. He was an outstanding looking dog, had a collar on. And I stopped my vehicle, opened the door, and he ran and jumped in. It was a bird dog, an English pointer. Well, so one day these people would come, and there was one trailer up there. And came time to feed my dog, and he wasn't around. We had two dogs. One dog was here, my dad had. And the dog I found was missing. And I thought, and the people who had been up there with their trailer and dog, they'd been training dogs. I didn't know them. And they were gone. And I thought, wonder if those people, my dog used to wander a bit. I wonder if he went up there and they picked it, if they thought he was lost. I called the rancher. He gave me their phone number, said, and I had a tag on the dog. So, yeah, we have your dog. Okay. Well, we're coming back to train soon. Well, they kept getting delayed on their trip to come and train. So I said, I better come and get my dog, you reckon? So I went and I saw their place. They had a very large kennel. And I got acquainted and became fast friends with these people and got into that, what they did, this competition of dogs. And I knew I had a connection with these people. I knew that Baba was connected with these people, but I didn't know how to express it. And I never did, never. And after about, I'm going to say maybe 10 years, I'm in their house one day, and I see over the fireplace, they went from bird dogs into greyhound racing, and they became the foremost greyhound the winningest greyhound kennel, the man and his wife, Dave and Janelle Pack, in North and South America, in the world. They were the people to beat. And they held track records for speed and time. So they were very good at what they did. I saw this, I went and I was looking on the mantle. They had some books there. And there I saw Lesson Humanity. And I said, damn. I know what I thought. I thought, damn. And I turned and I said, I took the book and I said, y'all, this is your book? Yeah. I said, Mayor Baba? Yeah. I said, I've been with Mayor Baba all the time. I never wanted to mention to you. And they just about fainted. They said, my God, no wonder. Because they felt the same way, but nobody, I knew intuitively. I don't know what they knew, but the book finally came forth. And that was what they knew of Mayor Bob. I'm not sure how they got the book. They had been in California, said they picked it up in California. So I think they were there for competition. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story, Ralph.
And that is an amazing book. Gosh, very.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jay.
All right. Well, we're at the 1 hour and 22 mark. Does anybody want to share another story or ask a question, or should we start to wrap it up?
Just a short story. I've always got a kick out of when Eddie Luck arrived at the New York Library trying to find the light. He went to the Religion and Philosophy Center section, and he's looking at the various books, and he sees Listen Humanity, and he says, words to the effect, wow, this person wants everybody to read his book. And that made an impact on me. I just love that.
Awesome. Who's sharing that story? It says Rosalie, but it doesn't sound like Rosalie.
Yeah, it's Rosalie on a rough day. No, it's Jonathan Burroughs.
Oh, hey, Jonathan. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Laurent?
Last thoughts and feelings. Go ahead, Betty.
Did Don talk to you about leaving Sufism or how that happened? I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that.
I don't need to be comfortable to talk about it. He did talk to me about it at length, and I put it in the book, in Almost Perfect Balance. He never left Sufism. He was evicted from the order by Ivy Deuce. And one of the last things he ever said to me before he passed away in 2010, he said to me, so he passed away in 2011. In 2010, at the age of like 90 or 91, he said to me, I'm still waiting to be reinstated into the order. And he said that Murshida Martin, his master, before he came to Meher Baba, said to him, once a Sufi, always a Sufi. He never left Sufism, and he always considered himself a Sufi.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That might be a good note to end on, unless we have last thoughts and feelings or burning desires about something to share.
Could you give details?
Was that Tina? Who was that?
Yes.
Tina? What? I don't understand your question.
Give us the gory details.
No, but you can read the book, An Almost Perfect Balance, and you can get all the gory details in the book. Not for right now. Thank you, Tina.
Okay.
All right, let's end with a moment of silence, the way Baba and Don would do it when Don was there, remembering Baba. Thank you, Baba. Jai Baba, everybody.
Jai Baba. Thank you very much, Lauren.